Part 1. A Cold Night in Austin. Austin, the capital of Texas, in December 1991 was a city in transition. It still carried the calm of a southern town, but it was also buzzing with the youthful energy of a growing university hub. On the evening of December 6th, as darkness fell, the small streets of North Austin slipped into quiet. The only glow came from neon signs, diners, shops, and hangouts where teenagers and college students gathered to mark the start of the weekend. One of those places was a brightly lit shop with an innocent name. I Can't Believe It Is Yogurt. For families, it was the kind of spot they trusted their kids to hang out in, a safe, wholesome place where teenagers could eat frozen yogurt and laugh together. That night, the store stayed open until closing. A few final customers walked out, leaving 4 teenage girls inside, 2 employees finishing their shift, 2 friends waiting to go home together. Just before midnight, a patrol officer noticed smoke rising into the night sky. Within minutes, fire crews rushed to the yogurt shop, smashing through the doors as flames tore across counters and walls. At first, it seemed like a routine fire, maybe an electrical mishap. But when the smoke cleared and the water hoses died down, what firefighters found inside changed Austin forever. On the charred floor lay the bodies of 4 girls. They had been bound, gagged, and arranged in haunting positions, some stacked on top of one another as if reduced to objects. Each had been shot in the head. Forensic traces suggested sexual assault. The fire had been set deliberately, meant to destroy the evidence. News of the crime spread like wildfire the next morning. Television screens showed the scorched storefront as anchors read headlines. 4 teenage girls found murdered in Austin yogurt shop. Parents clutched their children closer. Teachers broke down in classrooms as they took attendance, realizing 4 familiar faces would never return. The police sealed off the scene. Detectives, forensic specialists, and technicians combed through ashes late into the night. But the blaze had obliterated fingerprints, hair, fibers, everything fragile that might have led to the killers. One veteran officer whispered, "This is a nightmare crime scene." Austin, once known as a safe and easygoing city, felt its innocence shatter overnight. Where students once lingered in coffee shops and parents let kids roam free, now fear spread. People whispered that the killers could still be among them. The community gathered outside the shop, leaving flowers, candles, and photos of the girls. The vigil became both a symbol of grief and a cry for justice. From that night onward, the yogurt shop murders were no longer just a local tragedy. They were the beginning of one of the most haunting unsolved cases in Texas history. And the city, once carefree, now carried the weight of 4 silenced lives and the question that would echo for decades: who did this? Part 2. The 4 teenage girls. In the darkness of the burned-out yogurt shop, investigators did not just find 4 bodies. They uncovered 4 unfinished lives. The names Amy Ayers, Jennifer Harbison, Sarah Harbison, and Eliza Thomas soon appeared on television, in school yearbooks, and in the memories of friends, teachers, and families. To understand the pain Austin carried, you have to start with who these girls were. Amy Ayers, the youngest at just 13. Among the victims, Amy Ayers was the youngest, only 13. Friends described her as cheerful, always smiling and full of energy. She loved animals and often spent afternoons riding horses at a nearby ranch. Her family believed that passion would stay with her forever. Amy's sister once said she had a heart bigger than her small body. She often took in stray dogs and cats, caring for them until she could find them homes. On the night of the murders, Amy was simply tagging along with friends after dinner, never imagining it would be her last night alive. Jennifer Harbison, the strong older sister. Jennifer Harbison, 17, was Sarah's older sister. She was known for her independence and her protective nature. She joined the cheerleading squad at Lanier High School and loved biology, with dreams of becoming a medical researcher. At home, Jennifer was the anchor for her younger sister. The two were inseparable whether in class, at the mall, or at after-school hangouts. On December 6th, Jennifer was working the closing shift at the yogurt shop. Sarah and Amy were just there to keep her company. Sarah Harbison, the lively younger sister. Sarah was 15, full of laughter and youth. Friends called her the girl of smiles because she never stayed upset for long. She loved to sing, humming along to the latest radio hits. Teachers remembered her as bright but dreamy, sometimes lost in thought about what her future might hold. She once wrote in a class yearbook that she wanted to be a teacher or a singer. That evening, she and Amy went to the yogurt shop just to wait for Jennifer. It was supposed to be an ordinary Friday night. Eliza Thomas, the artist at heart. Eliza Thomas, 17, also worked at the yogurt shop. She was Jennifer's close friend and often got a ride from Jennifer's parents. Eliza was drawn to art. She sketched, wrote poetry, and designed posters for school activities. Her art teacher said Eliza saw beauty in everything. She dreamed of studying graphic design, a relatively new field in the early 1990s. That dream, like her sketchbooks, was left unfinished on the night of the murders. For incomplete stories. Together, the girls represented four unique but connected lives. Amy's compassion, Jennifer's strength, Sarah's laughter, and Eliza's creativity were cut short in a single night. The images of their lives, Amy on horseback, Jennifer and Sarah in cheer uniforms, Eliza with her drawings circulated in newspapers and on TV, haunting the community. For their families, the loss was unbearable. The Harbison family lost both daughters in one night. Amy's parents withdrew into grief. Eliza's parents, though private, still came to vigils, holding photos of their daughter. A close friend of Eliza wrote in her diary, "I can't believe she will never draw again. The world has lost a hand that could have created so much beauty." Symbols of a stolen generation. In the years that followed, the four girls became symbols of innocence stolen. Annual memorials were held, with candles lit and names read aloud. Classmates who grew up went on to careers, families, and lives, but always remembered their lost friends. For them, Amy, Jennifer, Sarah, and Eliza would never grow older. They would always remain teenagers in photos, frozen in the pages of a yearbook, smiling at a future they never got to see. Part 3. An investigation in desperation. On the night of December 6, 1991, after the flames were finally put out, the inside of I Can't Believe It Is Yogurt revealed a scene firefighters and police would never forget. The charred bodies, bound and gagged, lying in grotesque positions, some stacked like discarded objects, brought several first responders to tears. Forensic experts described it as a nightmare crime scene, a place where evidence was almost entirely destroyed by fire, smoke, and water. A crime scene erased. The blaze consumed nearly all physical evidence. Fingerprints, fibers, shoe impressions, most of it was ruined. Water from fire hoses washed away fragile biological traces. From the start, detectives knew they were fighting uphill. Still, they pieced together what they could. At least 2 firearms had been used. A. .22 caliber and A. .380 caliber. That suggested multiple attackers. The fire, clearly set with accelerants, was deliberate in effort to cover tracks. This was no random accident, but a calculated act of cruelty. A community in panic. Within days, Austin was gripped by fear. Local news plastered images of the blackened storefront, flowers piled high on the sidewalk, and tearful parents holding photos. Schools held prayer services. Parents forbade daughters from working late-night shifts. Coffee shops and grocery store aisles buzzed with anxious whispers. Who did this? Could they still be out there? Hundreds of tips flooded the police hotline. Some witnesses recalled two strange men lingering near the counter that night. Others remembered a suspicious car parked nearby. Dozens of people even phoned in false confessions, some mentally unstable, others craving attention. 700 leads and nothing. Over the first year, the Austin Police Department chased more than 700 leads. Detectives interviewed co-workers, classmates, former customers, and known offenders. Every path led to dead ends. Some investigators leaned toward robbery, as the motive money was missing from the register. But the brutality far exceeded a simple theft. Others focused on sexual assault, supported by forensic traces. Yet early DNA testing was too primitive to identify anyone with certainty. Pressure and psychological toll. Detective John Jones, one of the first on scene, later admitted he could not sleep for years. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the four girls in the ash. He and his colleagues logged countless overtime hours, flipping through files late into the night. The case consumed them. Pressure mounted. Families pleaded for justice. Reporters blasted headlines. Editorials accused police of incompetence. For a department unaccustomed to serial-style murders, the yogurt shop case became a public trial of its own. A cold case from the start. In law enforcement, the term cold case refers to investigations that go unsolved for years. But many detectives believe the yogurt shop murders were a cold case from day one. The evidence was too badly damaged. Every theory seemed to collapse under scrutiny. They knew the killers were still out there, but the trail was a maze with no exit, saving what little remained. Even so, investigators carefully preserved every scrap. Fragments of cloth, biological samples. Anything that survived the flames was sealed and stored. Though science in 1991 could not use them, detectives believed one-day technology might. It was a decision that would shape the future of the case. A city haunted. As 1992 passed, then 1993, 1994, and still no arrests, Austin carried the weight of unsolved horror. Neighbors locked doors for the first time. Parents repeated warnings, come home early, don't trust strangers. The once relaxed city tightened with anxiety. The yogurt shop murders had taken 4 lives. But it also stole something intangible: Austin's sense of safety. That loss lingered like a ghost over the city, a wound that years of waiting could not heal. Part 4. The Controversial Confessions. Nearly 8 years after the tragedy, the yogurt shop murders seemed stuck in endless dead ends. Families waited. Detectives searched. And Austin lived with fear. Then, in 1999, police announced a shocking breakthrough. 4 young men had been arrested. For the first time, it felt like the mystery might finally have an answer. 4 names in the spotlight. The suspects were Robert Springsteen Jr., a 24-year-old former Lanier High School student; Michael Scott, an acquaintance of Springsteen, also in his 20s; Maurice Pierce, who years earlier had been questioned for owning a .22 pistol, similar to one used in the crime; Forrest Wellborn, another friend in the group. Police argued the 4 had plotted to rob the yogurt shop, then murdered the girls and set the fire to erase evidence. To the public, it seemed the nightmare might finally be over. But the case would soon unravel in ways no one expected. Interrogations under pressure. Videos of interrogations later revealed troubling methods. Michael Scott, who at first insisted he was innocent, began to change his story after hours of relentless questioning. On tape, he hesitated, often glancing at detectives as if for approval. At one point, he said he had pointed a gun at one of the girls, but when pressed for details, he got positions and events wrong, then contradicted himself. Robert Springsteen, too, confessed to involvement, but his account clashed with Scott's and with the crime scene evidence. Despite the inconsistencies, prosecutors leaned heavily on these statements, calling them the strongest evidence available. 2 convicted, 2 freed. The trials began. In 2001, Robert Springsteen was convicted of murder and sentenced to death, later reduced to life in prison. In 2002, Michael Scott was also convicted and sentenced to life. Forrest Wellborn was released after a jury could not agree on a verdict. Maurice Pierce was freed due to lack of evidence, though many still labeled him the one who got away. For grieving families, these verdicts were a moment of relief. It seemed, at last, that justice had been served, but that relief would prove short-lived. DNA changes everything. By the early 2000s, DNA technology had advanced rapidly. Samples preserved from the scene were tested again. The results shook the case. None of the DNA matched Springsteen or Scott. Defense attorneys argued the confessions were coerced. They highlighted contradictions, pointing out how detectives had fed details to the suspects. Human rights groups condemned convictions, warning that false confessions were all too common under pressure. In 2006, an appeals court overturned Springsteen's conviction due to constitutional violations. By 2009, both he and Scott walked free. A divided public. The releases split the community. Some believed the men were innocent, victims of a flawed system desperate to close a high-profile case. Others were convinced they were guilty, but had escaped on technicalities, insisting that multiple attackers could explain the DNA mismatch. Families, once hopeful, now felt abandoned. One father said bitterly, "I do not care who pays. I just want the truth. I just want to know what happened in that room." Tragedy continues. The story grew darker. In 2010, Maurice Pierce died in a confrontation with police, shot during a struggle. He never had the chance to prove guilt or innocence. Wellborn disappeared from public life, living quietly but forever linked to the case. Springsteen and Scott tried to rebuild their lives, but their names remained chained to the murders. A legal cautionary tale. The yogurt shop murders became a case study in wrongful confessions. Law schools dissected it. Criminologists cited it as a warning about the dangers of coercive interrogations. It revealed the gulf between public demand for swift justice and the slow, imperfect reality of investigations. Back to square one. By 2009, with the suspects freed and no new arrests, the case reset to 0. The girls were still gone. The killers still unknown. And the city of Austin was forced to face the painful truth. After nearly 2 decades, they were back where they had started, asking the same question with no answer. Part 5. The collapse of faith in justice. In 2009, when Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott walked out of prison after nearly a decade behind bars, Austin did not breathe a sigh of relief. Instead, the city sank into confusion, anger, and doubt. The yogurt shop murders, once thought solved, were suddenly open again. And this time, the wound was not only about 4 murdered girls, it was about shattered faith in justice itself. Suspects set free. The decision to release the men rested on a single truth: no DNA from the crime scene matched Springsteen or Scott. Without solid evidence, prosecutors could no longer justify keeping them locked up. For the legal system, it was a necessary correction. But for many in Austin, especially the victims' families, it felt like betrayal. A mother wept at a press conference. We thought justice had come. Now it is back to nothing. A divided community. Public opinion split sharply. Some believed the men were innocent, pointing to the shaky confessions and DNA evidence. Others were convinced they were guilty and had simply slipped through loopholes. If multiple attackers were involved, they argued, DNA mismatches did not prove innocence. This divide bled into vigils and memorials. What was meant to be a time of remembrance sometimes turned into heated debates. Newspaper editorials asked the question everyone struggled with: what is justice, a conviction, or the truth? Families trapped between hope and despair. For the victims' families, it was an unbearable roller coaster. First, the devastating loss. Then the relief of convictions. Then the crushing blow of overturned verdicts. Amy Ayres's parents grew withdrawn, describing their faith in the justice system as nearly gone. The Harbison family, who had lost both daughters, largely avoided the spotlight, weary of reopening wounds. Eliza Thomas's mother spoke softly but firmly. We do not need someone behind bars just to make us feel better. But we can't accept that the real killer is still free. Austin police under fire. The Austin Police Department also took heavy criticism. The reliance on questionable confessions left the department accused of rushing to judgment. Citizens accused them of caring more about appearances than truth. A retired detective admitted, "We were under enormous pressure. The city needed an answer. We thought we had it. Looking back, maybe we were wrong." An official cold case. After 2009, the yogurt shop murders were officially labeled a cold case. The unsolved DNA samples remained in storage, still carrying secrets. But no new arrests were made. Nearly 20 years after the killings, Austin still had no named killer. Fear without closure. The absence of closure left the city uneasy. If the killers were never caught, could they strike again? Parents kept warning daughters not to work late shifts. Adults who had been teenagers in 1991 still remembered the fear. We lost our innocence that night. And when the suspects were freed, the little faith we had left vanished. A bitter lesson. The yogurt shop murders became a cautionary tale in criminal justice. It exposed the dangers of building cases on confessions alone. It showed the painful gap between the public's demand for swift answers and the slow, messy pursuit of truth. Law schools used the case to teach about false confessions. Advocates pushed for reforms to interrogation procedures. The tragedy became more than local, it was a national example of how justice can falter. A city without trust. But for Austin, the deepest wound was loss of trust. The city had once believed in its safety. Then it believed in its police. By 2009, both illusions had collapsed. Justice never arrived. The killer was still unknown. And trust, once broken, would never be the same. Part 6: The Remaining Ghosts. When Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott were released, the yogurt shop murders returned to square one. Yet in the files of the Austin Police Department and in the memories of the community, shadows still lingered. Unanswered questions, unidentified faces, and the chilling thought that the real killers might still be out there. The two mysterious men. From the very beginning, several witnesses reported seeing two strange men inside the yogurt shop shortly before the fire. One customer recalled them loitering near the counter, speaking quietly to each other before leaving abruptly. Another described them only in vague terms: jeans, one tall and thin, the other shorter. No, one remembered clear faces. Police attempted composite sketches, but they were too fuzzy to be useful. Decades later, no one has ever stepped forward to claim, "That was me." And so the two men remain spectral figures, possibly harmless customers, or possibly the very killers who vanished into the night. Conflicting witness accounts. Beyond the mystery men, witness accounts contradicted one another. Some said they saw a light-colored pickup speeding away. Others swore it was a dark sedan. In an era before widespread surveillance cameras, memory was the only evidence, and memory is fragile, blurred by fear and time. The unidentified DNA. More haunting than eyewitness contradictions was the unmatched male DNA found at the crime scene. It appeared both on one of the victims and on items inside the shop. This was undeniable proof at least one unknown man had been there. Yet, he has never been identified. His genetic profile matches no one in criminal databases. He was never arrested, never swabbed, never entered into the system. For families, the DNA was both hope and torment. Hope that science could one day reveal him. Torment because it meant the true killer might have lived freely among them for decades. Rumors and theories. Over time, rumors filled the void. Some believed it was the work of a traveling serial killer passing through Austin. Others suspected a botched robbery gone horribly wrong. Still others insisted the attacker must have known the girls, that the crime was too personal to be random. None of the theories were ever proven, but they deepened the sense of unease. People glanced over their shoulders in diners and movie theaters, wondering, is it him? Was he there that night? The silence of truth. Perhaps the most haunting ghost of all is the silence around what really happened inside the shop between closing time and the fire. Who pulled the first gun? Did the girls try to run? Why were their bodies arranged so grotesquely? Families live with these unanswered questions every day. One relative once asked, did she suffer? Did she cry out? Whose eyes did she see last? A collective haunting. For Austin, the yogurt shop murders are more than a crime. They are a lingering ghost story, passed down through generations. Children grew up hearing whispers about the four girls in the yogurt shop as a warning about hidden dangers. Adults still light candles every December, unwilling to let memory fade. The case remains unsolved, suspended in uncertainty. And in that uncertainty, ghosts remain of two men who walked into a shop, of DNA with no name, of a truth never spoken. Part 7, New DNA and New Hope. 3 decades after the murders, I can't believe it is yogurt, no longer stood on the map of Austin. The shop was gone, replaced by other businesses. But the memory of the four girls remained, like a scar the city could not erase. For detectives and families, time had not closed the wound. It had only sharpened the need for answers. And now they look to science for hope. From primitive to powerful. Back in 1991, DNA analysis was in its infancy. The samples collected from the scene were too damaged by fire and water to yield clear results. Through the 1990s, investigators had little to work with. But by the 2000s, DNA technology had transformed. Techniques like YSTR testing, which traces paternal lines through the Y chromosome, and genealogical DNA, which connects samples to family trees, changed everything. Cases thought unsolvable were suddenly cracked open. The most famous example was the capture of the Golden State Killer, identified after more than 40 years. For Austin, that success was more than a headline. It was a lifeline. The DNA with no name. Among the evidence preserved from the yogurt shop was at least one unidentified male DNA profile. It appeared on a victim's body and on evidence inside the store. It was undeniable proof someone had been there, but that someone was not in any police database. No arrest record, no prison sample, no official trace. He remained invisible. This fact both devastated and sustained the families. It meant the real killer had escaped. But it also meant the case was not dead. The DNA was still waiting for the right science. Genealogical DNA. In recent years, Austin police partnered with specialized labs using genealogical DNA. This method does not rely on the suspect being in a database. Instead, it searches millions of public genetic profiles from ancestry sites. If a distant cousin appears, a fourth or fifth relative, analysts can build family trees and narrow the search. It was the exact strategy that unmasked the Golden State Killer. Now, investigators hoped it could finally unmask the yogurt shop killer too. Families rekindle hope. News of genealogical testing reignited hope for the families. Sean and Angie Ayers, the brother and sister-in-law of Amy, became outspoken advocates for advanced testing. They raised awareness and pushed for funding, convinced the answer lay in those sealed samples. One relative of Eliza Thomas said, "Every time I hear about new DNA technology, I think maybe this is the year. Maybe this is the moment we finally know." For them, time was not the enemy. Time was an ally. Because every passing year meant better science, sharper tools, and a greater chance that the truth would emerge. The Cold Case Unit. In response to public pressure, Austin created a dedicated cold case unit. The yogurt shop murders were placed at the top of its priority list. Detectives combed through old files, re-examined witness accounts, and resubmitted evidence for new testing. They reminded the public in interviews, this case is not closed. It never has been. It was more than an investigation, it was a promise. Spotlight returns. Podcasts, documentaries, and news specials kept the case alive. In 2025, HBO Max released The Yogurt Shop Murders, a docuseries that drew global attention. Thousands of viewers contacted police with tips. Most led nowhere. But investigators said even one useful lead, combined with DNA, could unlock the truth. Fragile but enduring hope. 3 decades on, the killers remain unknown. But the science keeps advancing. And the DNA is still there, waiting. As one detective put it, the killer might think he got away. But DNA does not forget. Even if he is old, even if he is dead, his family tree will tell us who he was. And when it does, we will be ready. Part 8. The Legacy of a Tragedy. When people think of Austin, they often picture live music, college life, and coffee shops filled with students. But beneath that vibrant image lies a darker memory: the yogurt shop murders. The killing of 4 teenage girls in 1991 was more than a crime. It became a lasting scar, shaping the city, the justice system, and even the nation. A city that lost its innocence. Before 1991, Austin was seen as a safe, trusting place. People left doors unlocked. Teenagers walked home at night without fear. But after December 6th, that world was gone. Parents began watching their children more closely. Small businesses installed cameras. Conversations carried a new edge of suspicion. Could the killer be a neighbor, a stranger sitting next to me? For many, that night marked the end of innocence in Austin. It was a dividing line, life before and life after. Pushing legal reforms. The yogurt shop murders also sparked legal changes. Interrogation reforms. The controversial confessions exposed the risks of coercion. Today, full video recordings of interrogations are far more common, meant to protect against forced statements. Cold case resources. The case helped justify the creation of Austin's Cold Case Unit, dedicated to re-examining unsolved crimes. That unit still carries the yogurt shop file at the top of its list. Victims' families' rights. Relatives of the girls helped push for the Homicide Victims' Families' Rights Act of 2021, which expanded access to information and legal protections for families waiting years, even decades, for justice. A culture of remembrance. Every December 6th, people in Austin light candles for Amy, Jennifer, Sarah, and Eliza. The yogurt shop may be gone, but the corner where it once stood has become a place of memory. Flowers, photos, and handwritten notes appear there like clockwork. Schools sometimes pause to remember them. Teachers tell new generations their story not just to mourn, but to remind students that safety is fragile and justice must be pursued. True crime and public memory. The case also became part of America's true crime canon. Books, TV specials, podcasts, and documentaries have retold the story again and again. In 2025, HBO Max's The Yogurt Shop Murders reached audiences worldwide, transforming local pain into a global mystery. The appeal is not just the crime itself. It is the human story, the failures, the endurance, and the unanswered questions. The case stands alongside the Zodiac Killer and JonBenet Ramsey as one of America's most haunting unsolved mysteries. A legacy of pain and persistence. The Yogurt Shop Murders left two legacies. One is sorrow, the brutality of the crime, the flaws in the investigation, the family's endless grief. The other is resilience, the determination to keep fighting, to preserve evidence, to believe science will one day reveal the truth. Each candle lit in December carries both grief and hope. Hope that DNA will speak. Hope that justice, even if delayed, will not be denied. A collective memory. In the end, the murders belong not only to the families but to the whole city. Austin carries the memory as part of its history. It shaped how people think about safety, how law enforcement handles cases, and how society values the rights of victims. The Yogurt Shop Murders remain unsolved, but they have already changed the world around them. And perhaps that is the most enduring legacy, a tragedy that forced a city and a country to confront its own vulnerabilities and demand something better. Part 9. An open ending, questions without answers. More than 30 years have passed since that night on December 6, 1991. Austin today is a booming city, filled with skyscrapers, art districts, and tech companies. But when the names Amy, Jennifer, Sarah, and Eliza are spoken, the city falls silent. The pain is still there, as if time never moved. The unanswered question. The Yogurt Shop Murders remain one of Texas's most haunting mysteries. 4 teenage girls were bound, shot, and burned. The killers vanished. Suspects were tried, convicted, then freed. DNA evidence waits in silence, but no one has yet been named. And the question endures: who did this? Every new scientific tool raises hope. Every anniversary renews the grief. And still, the answer has not come. Wounds that never close. For the families, the lack of resolution is a wound that never heals. They lost their daughters, but they also lost the comfort of truth. Instead, they live in a cycle of hope and despair. One parent said, "We do not need miracles. We just need the truth." Even after 30, 40 years, if anyone knows anything, please speak. Their grief has become action. They fought for cold case funding. They pushed for victims' rights laws. They turned their sorrow into a force that outlived the killer's silence. Justice as a fragile idea. The case also exposed justice as fragile and imperfect. Justice is not just a conviction. It is the truth. It is a fair process. It is holding the real killer accountable. For Austin, justice appeared then vanished. Convictions turned to dust. The city was left with nothing but questions. Perhaps the greatest lesson is that justice cannot be rushed. It takes patience, persistence, and sometimes generations of waiting. A city still waiting. Every December, candles glow outside the former yogurt shop. Names are whispered: Amy, Jennifer, Sarah, Eliza. The city has grown and changed, but those flames remind Austin that some stories never end. For the young, the murders are a warning. For the old, they are a wound. For everyone, they are a reminder that evil once walked among them, and perhaps still does. Will justice ever come? Detectives insist the DNA will one day reveal the truth. Perhaps the killer is old now. Perhaps he is dead. But DNA does not die. It endures, waiting to speak. The only question is whether justice will arrive in time for the families who have waited so long, or whether they will carry their questions with them to the grave. An unfinished chapter. The yogurt shop murders close this story, but not in real life. The case remains unsolved. The truth remains hidden. All that is certain is this: Austin will never forget. And every time the story is told, one question hangs in the air, unanswered, unending. Who killed the 4 girls in the yogurt shop?